Hello everyone and welcome back to Tea Time Crochet. Today we're going to be working on the Wizard's Shawl. It's basically a triangle shawl that has puff stitches in it. So every 3 rows is a puff stitch row, and it is made out of the Lion brand mandala yarn, and this colorway is Wizard. So that's kind of where the name of the shawl came from. But this is what the front looks like, and this is the back. As you can see, the colors are really pretty and they transition really well. That's what I love about this yarn, is it's not a real hard color change. They kind of melt into each other, so that's really nice, especially for shawls. You don't have that weird abruptness that some striping yarns does. But this is what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the tutorial. Okay, so the things that you're going to need is you're going to need to either have 1 skein of mandala yarn by Lion brand, which is 590 yards. I used almost all of the skeins, so let's see. It is a number 3 worsted weight or lightweight yarn. But you could use this specific yarn, or you could use a worsted weight yarn, and it will look just the same. So if you're going to use a different yarn, you're going to need at least 590 yards. So for Red Heart, that would be 2 skeins of Red Heart. You wouldn't use all of it, but you would be pretty close. So the one that I made the shawl out of was the colorway Wizard. I have lost the label to that, so this is the colorway Gnome. I'm working on a different project with this, but I love this yarn. It's really nice to work with. The colorways are very pretty and they transition really well. And it's machine washable and dryable. It's 100% acrylic, so you know that's great. I really don't like having projects that are made out of stuff that have to be hand washed, because I just don't have time. So I'm glad that they're finally coming out with some acrylic yarns that have the beautiful colorways that remind me a lot of hand-dyed yarns. So like I said, 1 skein of mandala or 2 skeins of Red Heart Super Saver. For me today, I'm just doing a sample, so I'm just using this Red Heart with Love. It is a number 4 worsted weight yarn in the color Iris, but like I said, I'm just doing a sample, so it really doesn't matter what yarn I use. You're going to need a 6mm crochet hook, your yarn needle with a large eye, and your scissors. We're going to start off with a magic loop. So how you do magic loop is, how I do mine is I just take my 2 fingers and I hold my yarn like this and I wrap it around and cross it over. So I'm holding on to the tail with this end, and then I cross over when I go through the top, and then I just reach under this loop and grab the yarn that's attached to the ball and pull it through and do a slip knot or a slip stitch, and that secures it. If you've watched my past videos, you probably know that I don't like using magic loop. It is one of my least favorite ways to start a project, because I have a horrible record with them coming undone. I don't know why. I do it exactly, the same as everybody else, but so you'll see once I've completed this first row that I'm going to tie off this yarn to secure it, just simply because I don't want my shawl to come undone. So from here we're going to put 3 double crochets into the ring. So we're just going to kind of pull our little loop here up a little bit, and we're going to go straight into that with a double crochet. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to chain 2. So 1, 2, and remember that you never want to chain too tightly, otherwise you won't have the space that you need. So you just kind of want to have an even tension as you're chaining. And then we're going to put 3 more double crochets into that section. 1, 2, and 3. And that is the end of row 1. So we're going to pull that tail, pull it tight. And so what I would normally do is, if this was an actual project, I would go ahead and take this yarn and tie a little knot right there and then hide it so you can't see the knot. But since this is only a sample, I'm probably not going to do that. But you don't have to do that. But if you are like me and have problems with the magic loop actually staying, that would be a wise thing to do. So what we're going to do for row 2 is we're just going to chain 1, and as usual, the chain 1 doesn't even exist. And we're going to put 2 double crochets into this beginning stitch. So that's 1 and 2, and that's going to be our increase. And we're going to just put 1 double crochet in each one of the stitches until we get to our chain 2 space. So for this row we have 2 more stitches. And then in our chain 2 space, we're going to put 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Just like that. And then we're going to put 1 double crochet in each one of the next 2 stitches. So each stitch until we get to our last one. And then in that last stitch that we have here, we're going to put 2 double crochets. So that is the end of row 2. So for row 3 is where our puff stitch starts. So we're going to chain 1, and as usual we're going to forget that even exists, so I'm not going to say that anymore. We're going to put 2 double crochets into this beginning stitch. We're going to chain 1, skip 1, and then in the next stitch we're going to put our puff stitch. So for a puff stitch, you're going to yarn over, go into the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go into the stitch, pull up a loop, and I do that 4 times for my puff stitches, which is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches on the loop, or on the hook. And then we're just going to pull through all of those 9 stitches. And then we're going to chain 1 to secure. And this chain 1 that pulls all the loops together doesn't count as a stitch. It's part of the puff stitch. So just keep that in mind when you're going on, that this that pulls all the puff stitches together doesn't count as anything. It just is connecting the top of the puff stitches, and that you still need to chain 1 here. So it's going to feel like you're chaining 2 even though you're really not. So you're going to chain 1, skip 1, and then in the next stitch we're going to do another puff stitch. So 2, 3, and 4. So that's 9 loops on the hook, and then you're going to pull through all 9. And then chain 1 to secure that. So we are at our corner space here. So we're just going to work our corner as, which is the chain 2 space, as the same on every row, no matter whether we're on a puff stitch row or whether a double crochet row. So we're going to put 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space, and then chain 2, and then 2 more double crochets. So now we need to work up the other side. So we want our both sides to mirror each other. So we know we need to skip this one and put a double or a puff stitch into the next one. So that's 9 loops on the hook, and then slip stitch to secure, and then we're going to chain 1, skip 1, and in the next one put a puff stitch, and then I'm going to go through all those loops and then slip stitch to secure, and we're going to chain 1, and we are back, and we're going to skip the next one, and then we are back to the very last stitch. So we know we need to put 2 double crochets into that stitch. So these are the three rows that you're going to repeat. You're going to have 2 regular double crochet rows and then your puff stitch row. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more repeat section with you. So we know that we just finished our puff stitch row, so we need to chain 1, and always in the beginning and the end stitch you're going to put 2 double crochets. We always need that increase because that's what's going to make our shawl get bigger. So we're going to put 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and that chain 1 space we're just going to put a double crochet around it, just like that. And then for the puff stitch we're just going to put a double crochet in the top of that puff stitch, and then we have another chain 1 space, and then we have another puff stitch, and another chain 1 space, and then we have our double crochets here for the corner space, and we're going to work into those. And then for our chain 2 we're going to put 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, and then we're just going to work our way back up the other side. So these are our 2 double crochets from the previous row from the corner space. And then we have a puff stitch. You chain 1 space that we need to put a double crochet in, a puff stitch space, another chain 1, and then you'll have 2 double crochets at the very end. And remember, in that last stitch you always need to put 2 double crochets for the increase. So there is row 4. It can be a little confusing working through the chain 1 spaces and then the puff stitch spaces. So just as long as you're making sure you're working in each one of the stitches that need to have a double crochet, you'll be fine. So we're going to chain 1, and this row is really easy. We're just going to put 1 double crochet in every stitch until we get to our chain 2 space. Nope. See, I almost missed my increase there. So if for some reason it's not adding up and your stitches aren't fitting the way they're supposed to be, that probably means that you've missed an increase somewhere. So your count's off. have one more right before the chain 2. So here's our chain 2 space, and we're going to put 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. And then we're just going to work our way back up the other side, putting 1 double crochet in every stitch until we get to our last stitch. And then here's my last stitch, so I know I need to put 2 double crochets into it. And that is what you should have so far. So the next row will be our puff stitch. So once again, we're going to chain 1. We're going to put 2 double crochets into that beginning stitch there. And we're going to chain 1. Skip 1 and put our puff stitch in the next. And then we're going to slip stitch that to secure all those loops. And then chain 1 again. Skip 1, and in the next one we're going to put our puff stitch. And then chain 1 to secure that. And then chain 1, skip 1, and then puff stitch in the next. Chain 1, skip 1, and puff stitch in the next. And we're just going to continue in that pattern until we get to our chain 2 space. So our last puff stitch will be in this last stitch here. And then you just want to go ahead and chain 1 again, and then do your 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space. And you want to mirror the other side, so you need to chain 1 and then put your puff stitch into that beginning stitch. And then chain 1 again, skip 1, put your puff stitch in the next. And you're just going to continue that all the way up the other side until you get to your last stitch. So Okay, so your last puff stitch is going to be in this stitch that's right before the last stitch, so second from the end. And then you're still going to chain 1, and then you're going to put 2 double crochets in that last stitch. And that is what you're going to repeat throughout the entire length of your shawl. So these first 3 rows are your repeats. So you have 2 regular double crochet rows and then a puff stitch row. And for the next row, you're going to do it exactly the same way that I showed you for this row right here. You're just going to work in each one of the double crochets, the chain 1 space, and then the top of the puff stitch. And then you're going to work all your way to your corner, and your corner chain 2 space is going to be a 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, and then you're just going to mirror the other side back up, and you just keep going until you could do what I did, and I just kept going until I ran out of yarn. I had enough left to finish one last row, and then I had like maybe 6 inches left. So 2 skeins of Red Heart Super Saver or 1 skein of mandala should get you a full-size shawl. You could also use shawl in a ball. I'm not sure on the yardage on that one, so you would just kind of have to fiddle with it. I would probably get 2 just in case, because the shawl in a ball, it is less yardage, but I got a full-size shawl out of it, so you would just have to see. And you know, if you buy 2 skeins and only use 1, that's just an extra skein you have to make something else with, because that's really beautiful yarn too. So go ahead and finish out all of yours, and then of course when you're done, you're just gonna fasten off, pull through, and cut your yarn. I'm not gonna cut mine because this is just a sample, but and then hide all of your ends, and you'll have an end here to hide too if you hadn't already done that. If you're like me and went ahead and tied a knot in it and hid it, then you won't have to worry about it, so you just have your one. And then you can just throw it in the washer and dryer and block it out,